Hello, this video is going to cover the Hatadah by Zara Yacob in the book The Rationality of the Heart by Teodros Kiros. So the Hatadah, which you've read from 50 to basically 75, is kind of contains passages from the text that Zara Yacob wrote centuries ago. And a lot of the commentary is written by Teodros Kiros, who's a philosopher, a contemporary philosopher. So Zara Yacob is Ethiopian, as Teodros Kiros. And we're going to talk a little bit about Ethiopia to put it in context of what's going on with Yacob during that time and where Ethiopia fits in the history of the world and why I've chosen an Ethiopian text for have you read. So Ethiopia is a country in sub-Saharan Africa. It's right near the bottom of Sudan, where Sudan ends, right? It's underneath Egypt and all these other countries up there, right? And Ethiopia has been a powerful country for thousands of years. Even the ancient Egyptians mentioned the Ethiopian people. So they've been around for a long time and have empires of varying sizes. Ethiopia is also well known for being one of the earliest nations to convert to Christianity. Armenia was the first, but Ethiopia was the second. They made their official religion Christianity. And therefore, since the 300s AD, they've had their own long tradition of Christian thought and imagery and culture, most associated with the Orthodox version of branch of Christianity. So, and part of the reason they broke away from the Catholic Church with all a lot of the other Orthodox branches was where basically over some strong disagreements over Christian tenets of faith and what's in the Bible and all these things, right? For Ethiopians in particular, their Bible is known to be the biggest, right? The Protestant Bible has about 68 books, the Catholic Bible has about 74, and the Ethiopian Bible has 88. So that's a lot of books, and that's part of why they broke away. And if you look at their culture and tradition, you find a lot of beautiful imagery of Ethiopian looking Jesuses and Marys and Saint Paul and all these figures are rendered in their own image. So you have a different tradition of iconography as well. So it's in this context that Yacob is emerging and being born, right? He's someone who's coming around the 1500s, his most active times during that time period. And it's a time when Ethiopia is actually in trouble. They're being attacked by the Islamic Empire. And Ethiopia has a long history of Islam too. When Muhammad was kicked out of his hometown, he actually fled to the Ethiopian kingdom and they gave him shelter. So, in fact, some of the first converts of Islam are from Ethiopia. Some of the oldest communities are from Ethiopia. So, Ethiopia has this powerful connection with the foundations of Islam and Christianity, and some of the oldest Jewish communities are also in Ethiopia. In fact, a lot of Ethiopian Jewish people actually left Ethiopia during the 80s when there was a really bad famine, and they've all moved to Israel. Israel said, hey, we'll come airlift you out if you're willing to move here. So a lot of Ethiopian Jewish people went to Israel in the 80s. I have a really good friend who was born in Ethiopia in 82 and left when he was around two. So, but we'll go back to where we are in the 1500s. Ethiopia needs some help, and so they're trying to look for support. And like, well, who's a good ally against the Islamic Empire? Well, the Europeans have been fighting them for centuries already. Let's go ask them. And at the time, the most powerful force was Portugal. Portugal was still more powerful than Spain at this point. And so they said, hey, Portugal, can you help us out with this? And Portugal said, sure, we will. But you got to convert to real Christianity, true Christianity, not the kind of backwards Christianity you have, which if you, in the opening section you've read, they talk more about how the Portuguese and the Jesuit missionaries viewed the Ethiopians. But the king ended up converting, the king of Ethiopia. He said, hey, I'll become Catholic as long as you help me not get conquered. And so they sent support. They also sent Jesuit missionaries. So it's in this context that there's a wide variety of different perspectives emerging at this time. You have the Jesuit missionaries there who have different agreements over what's the value of the Ethiopian culture and Christian interpretation. You have the king who's converted to Catholicism, but not necessarily out of a sincere inner conversion to their way, but for political reasons. Then you have the traditional Ethiopian perspectives. So there's all these kinds of changes going on, and wondering, well, where is this? Where are we going with this? Our perspective? Where are we going with our culture, our worldview? And it's in this context that Zara Yacob emerges as a thinker. And what led him to do his inquiry is actually that he was talking bad about the king. He was saying, "Hey, this conversion is bad. This is not a true thought. It's not good for the country." And some of his community told on him. They went to the king and said, "Hey, this guy's talking bad about you. Like you might want to, do something about it and help reward us. Help us out." And so Yaakov was summoned by the king. He said, "Okay, come here. Like, what are you saying about me?" And Yaakov, he attributes this to divine intervention from God. He wasn't punished. He just told his truth of what I think and what I feel, everything. And the king said, "Okay, you're banished. I'm not going to kill you, but you can't be in the kingdom anymore. If we catch you, we'll kill you." And so he had to be live for a couple years in a cave. And it's in this cave that he wrote and meditated and reflected to create the Hatadah, also known as the inquiry or meditation. So this text, which talks about human nature and thought and reason and feeling, comes from the same kinds of things that are compelling lots of other modern thinkers around the world during this time and later, which is these various competing perspectives and worldviews, and how are you to make sense? What's true, right? If tradition isn't what it used to be, there's these new missionaries coming teaching different things and bringing different ideas. What's really true in this context, right? My friends betrayed me, right? So what can I rely upon? What can I trust? I'm in a cave, right? And it's in this context that Jacob begins to think and comes up with his answers to his situation. I think all good philosophy is a response to one's existential condition, right? Where are you located in the world? What's going on? What spurs you to have a crisis? What makes you feel anxious? What makes you feel worried? What makes you feel like you're uncertain? And trying to think through those things to find some type of real security, to find some type of real meaning, to find some type of real purpose that you can share with others intellectually and spiritually, emotionally, physically, right? And so Jacob comes to some ideas. The first is that for Jacob, real thinking is meditative. What does that mean? It means that it comes from contemplation. It's not calculation, right? Many of you who are in engineering or math or even some of the sciences, you are learning a kind of thinking as a form of calculation, as a form of using formulas, right? You can use a formula, you plug in variables, you get data, you put it into a system, you get information, you organize a certain kind of way. That's a certain kind of thinking, but that's a calculative thinking or formulaic thinking. There's a set pattern, and you're trying to figure out how to plug in variables. And oftentimes the issue is, what's the most important variable in this situation? What variable should I include or not? How is this being modeled, or how is this formula running, right? But meditative or contemplative thinking is different, right? It's a kind of thinking you are doing oftentimes when you're really struggling with something. You really have to think really deeply. And there isn't necessarily a clear formula in the sense that you can't just say, "Oh, I need to resolve this family issue or where I stand on this issue. I need to find a formula and plug in these various information. Okay, here's the answer. I'm just going to go for it." Right? Oftentimes the answers aren't really clear, and you need time and space to wait for the answer to come to you. That's contemplative, meditative thinking. And so for Jacob, this is the most important form of thinking. This is where the thinking that allows you to encounter God, which for Jacob is incredibly important. He thinks that we can't really be moral humans. We can't even get to the truth without God. Because for Jacob, God is the source of truth. God is the source of goodness. Therefore, any real truth you want has to come from connecting with God. Humans, this is one of his views of human nature, right? Humans are incapable of getting the full truth of existence on our own, with our own reasoning faculties, right? This is very different than when we talked about with liberalism or humanism or certain modern scientific perspectives will say, "Hey, look, the truths that matter most to us we can get from our own reason. We can get from applying formulas and methods and techniques to get at the information in the world around us and organize in systemic ways and know what's true enough to live by. But Yacob says, no, that knowledge is ultimately going to fail you in the ways of being human that matter most, which for Yacob are moral, right? We'll talk about that a bit later. But he says that you need to have some type of relationship with God because God is the source of truth, right? Part of the scientific perspective is saying that the world, the outside world, outside this square, right, that I'm talking to you through, that's where truth is found. You go and observe it, and then you apply the formulas to it. But Yacob says that that's not where truth comes from. Truth comes from God. So you're supposed to turn towards God to receive truth. Now, with that in mind, we can turn towards his views of human nature, right? What is it, does he think is this, that the human, what are we? What is our purpose? What is our plan? All that stuff. Well, there's a couple things. One, he believes that reason, our own capacity to think, is a gift from God, right? Now, he does say that we need to meditate and reflect and attune ourselves towards God with our thinking. But he thinks that reason is given to us to understand God's creation. Reason is not a bad thing. Our own thoughts are not bad, right? We're supposed to have a personal inquiry into God. So, kind of how Protestantism says you have this personal relationship with God, Jacob says we have a personal inquiry into the world in alignment with God. We meditate, we attune with God, and we seek the truth for ourselves on a personal level. Right? For Jacob, you're not supposed to turn towards traditions or customs or norms in the same way that maybe some other religious beliefs might have you do. Like, hey, here's the authorities in the scripture, the authorities in the prophet, the authorities in the tradition of the church over the past centuries. You got to accept that. Jacob says, no, the truth is found in your own personal communion with God and seeking truth, right? But you have to imagine that standing on your own truth as a person is hard, right? To stand down and say, hey, this is what I believe. And if other people disagree with me, that's fine. If other people want to ostracize me, that's fine. If other people don't respect me, that's fine, right? That's not easy. It's much easier to suppress your own beliefs, right? If you have a disagreement and you're with a group of 10 people and they are important to you, you might say, I'm just not going to say what I think, right? Or you might explicitly agree with them and say, "Oh yeah," even if you don't. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, man, that person's so great. That person's so bad. That's such a great idea. Yeah, the country needs to do that. But often because you want social acceptance or belonging to the people that you're with, right? So for Jacob, there's this tension in the human being between our need to belong to culture and community and the truth, which comes from God, meaning it's outside of the realm of our morals and values and expectations. The source of it, but it's not. But truth and goodness aren't dependent on what humans think, but we can find it with our own thinking. So it's very hard to stand out on your own, stand in your own truth of who you are. And most people don't do it. They might do it sometimes, but it's human nature to kind of, for Jacob, to kind of turn away from the truth because you want security or you want power or desire or comfort or something like that, right? And that goes to his next statement about humans, which is that humans are basically lazy. We're prone to evil. We're prone to do the wrong thing for Jacob. It's hard to do good. There's so much encouragement to just satisfy your desires. There's so much encouragement to just do things wherever you want, as long as you won't get caught, right? There's so many people that will say they believe something, but in a different context, or I'll rather say they believe something is good, right, or bad. But in a certain context, they'll do the same. They'll do the thing they think is say is bad. They'll avoid the thing they say is good because they want something more, right? Like there might be example for bullying, or someone might be. Most people say bullying is wrong. You shouldn't bully somebody, right? But there are situations in high school and grade school or college even where some people they'll accept They won't stand up, they won't criticize or something when someone's being mistreated because they don't want to be rejected by the group or they don't want to be attacked themselves, right? So in that situation, they're actively choosing not to do the right thing, right? And for Yacob, he says that's what's most natural to humans, this kind of inertia to just be comfortable, satisfy your own desires, portray your thoughts when it's convenient, right? He says that's more what's in our nature. Really, we're supposed to strive towards goodness, right? He also talks about superstition. He says a lot of the people he knows, they're prone to superstition, right? And so, but this fallen nature, right? For some perspectives, some Christian perspectives, it's a great tragedy, right? Certain interpretations of the story of Adam and Eve, right? Where we eat the fruit from the tree, the snake convinces Eve to eat the apple, and after that, we're banished from Eden and we're punished, and now we're fallen and sinful, and we kind of broke God's plan with our free will, right? Jacob is different. He says that the imperfections that we have, this fallen nature, was intended by God in a certain sense that God gave us the capacity to be flawed so that we might improve, right? We can never be perfect from Jacob's perspective because God is perfection, but we can move towards that. We can move towards God. We can move towards being better, higher beings. And in that sense, it's similar to Al Shariati talks about if you when you look at that video, and it's similar to what Rousseau talks about somewhat with perfectibility. So this idea that we can improve ourselves is for Jacob is very important. But as we said, a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people do not want to improve that much. In fact, many times if you critique someone or criticize someone that even about something they know they shouldn't be doing or know is not good for them, they'll say, "What do you know about me? I'm entitled to do what I want. I should be, because they don't want to change or improve." So this God has given us a task to perfect ourselves, but it's not an easy one. But the key piece of it is reason for Yaakov, thinking. Like the thinking for Yaakov gives us the capacity to see the structure of the universe. That is something that we share that with God, a gift to see through, right? And it's in really loving the truth that we can develop our fullest potential, right? But most human beings are not going to do that, right? So if it's not necessarily calculative reasoning that is the kind of reason he talks about, and it's meditative, well, what are the qualities of this thinking that are very important, right? We're going to talk about two qualities. The first is choice. For Jacob, choice is where the real freedom of human beings comes through, the ability to make a choice. And the harder the choice is, the more freedom is required of you, right? So the more character is required of you. And because we're free, Jacob wants to say that evil, most evil in the world, is a choice by humans, right? That people choose to live certain ways that culminate them in evil behaviors. What do I mean by that? Well, one thing that's very important to talk about with Jacob with this choice is habits. Now, for Jacob, habits are very important. And he shares this with the philosopher Aristotle, an ancient Greek philosopher, which some of you might have heard of. But both of them say that a human being is ultimately their habits. You're what you do repeatedly every day. That's really what you truly are. Not necessarily what you say, but what you do day in and day out. The habits you build are your character, the foundation of your character, and the foundation of what you really are as a human being. Now, a lot of bad behavior, Jacob argues, stems from bad habits. They start off small, right? You maybe don't tell the truth in certain situations. Then it builds over time. And then 10, 15 years later, you get in a car accident and you kill somebody, but then you try to pretend like it never happened. You run away from the scene, right? As many people will do, right? And leave someone to die, or maybe someone dies because you left them instead of calling the police. Well, for Yacob, that's not that person deciding to flee the car chase. That didn't happen in one moment, right? That person had already been living a life of smaller things that when that crisis came, the person made the choice to do the wrong thing. So for Yacob, evil is largely a result of our choices, right? He's not the kind of person that puts a lot of investment on nature versus nurture in that sense. And the way we say that, there's this, is it kind of in your nature to do certain things, or is society making you this? That's the kind of classic debate, right? How much of your behavior is in your genes, and how much of your behavior is in how you're raised? Well, Jacob's kind of in the middle of that. He says that, or kind of it's a third option, which is as a rational, free being, it's your choices over time that matter the most. Now, those conditions, you get shaped by your nature, you get shaped by how you're raised, of course. But ultimately, you have the capacity to see and make choices to do things different. And if you choose, there's a certain point where you make a choice to behave or not behave in certain kinds of ways, and then that will build over time, right? And of course, that means you can change as well, but it's not easy. It's difficult, right? So character for Yaakov is very important because your thoughts, your thought patterns, are connected to the habits that you have. So it's very important to have good habits because good habits shape good thinking. And so for Jacob, if we want to promote more good in the world, we have to encourage and give people the power to change their habits to ways that are better. And the reason why I say empower people is because for Jacob, as we said, this is not an easy thing, right? You have the inertia of the human body that kind of just wants to be satisfied and have its desire, feel comfortable and all those things. And then you have the cultural inertia, which says, hey, this is how things are. Don't rock the boat. Don't change things too much. Don't disrupt things. Even if something's wrong, maybe we've been doing it for 300 years, 500 years, don't change it, right? There's a kind of inertia in the body, in the society, in the material. And it's our mind, our rational ability, which is kind of free from that, right? So one thing that's important for understanding how human reason really finds the truth is that for him, reason, the root, if reason is the if the the ideas and rational society is the crown of the leaves of the tree, well then habits are the trunk, right? They're the thing that's sturdy and stable that the leaves can grow from, right? Now the second part that's very important is heart. For Jacob, the heart is actually the real seat of rationality, our emotional life, right? And by heart, we don't just mean the organ that pumps blood. We mean when we say, like when someone plays sports or in life, we say that person has a lot of heart. He has a lot of heart. She has a lot of heart, right? What does that mean? What are we saying when we say that someone has a lot of heart? We're saying that they have a lot of emotional energy, but also a lot of willpower connected to their emotional feelings. Or what if someone we say their heart's not in it, right? Their heart's not in it. What are we saying? Are we saying that they didn't place their heart in something? No, we're saying that they don't have this kind of inner emotional, energetic will attachment, right? So for Jacob, this is what he's talking about when he's saying the heart, that there's this kind of will or emotional energy that we have in our feelings. And for Jacob, that's where true thinking is grounded. So if habits are the trunk, your heart is the roots of your mind's thoughts. Real thinking starts in your heart. So it's very important to have an open heart, right? And for the best way, here's an example that really shows this. For Jacob, a rational person, a person who's truly rational, has to love the truth. They have to love the truth. And this is different than someone, for example, who's very intelligent but lies, right? Someone could be very intelligent and manipulate all kinds of situations and outthink people and tell this lie here, tell this lie there, and manipulate all the people around them. But for Jacob, that person is not really rational. because their passion, their emotional world is not invested in the truth. It's invested in something else, right? Their desires. They want things in the world, and they're willing to lie to get them, even if they're outsmarting people. For Yacob, that person is not really rational because reason and a love of what reason represents most, truth, is not in the driver's seat in that person. Their emotional issues. There are some people that have traumas, right? Strong emotional reactions and can manipulate and do all kinds of things and think very clearly, be very brilliant, but they're not necessarily grounded in a love of truth, right? So for Jacob, you have to love the truth, but also you have to be clear about what you feel, right? So for Jacob, truth of the heart means that these are truths that are carefully felt out, not just carefully thought out, but felt out, right? Sometimes when we are in situations, we have conflicting feelings. We don't know exactly how we feel about certain things. We might have two or three or four feelings at once about something. And the typical Western model of rationality says, well, you just suppress them the best you can and just try to think through, right? Well, Jacob says you can't really suppress them. One is going to have more of an, some are going to have more of an influence than others, but suppressing them doesn't necessarily, even if you could, to the extent you can, doesn't help you get to the truth. For Jacob, God speaks through the heart. God communicates through the heart, right? Therefore, you have to be still and quiet your heart. This is very similar to the contemplation of the Jesuit perspective, right? That you figure out, what do I really feel? And where are my feelings coming from? And what feelings are actually important? And what feelings are actually connected to the situation? And what feelings are not? It's in that piece of being able to sort your feelings that true reason can really do what it's supposed to do, right? So, on that note, we will wrap up this talk on Zara Yacob. There's much more in the text, of course, but there's hope this gives you some clarity over some of the key ideas in it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.